Later, they arrived at their destination, and Michael invited them to enter. The room was filled with golden shining objects, and Michael informed them that they could speak freely now. Michael suddenly realized something and clicked the device he was holding once more. The interruption barrier once again shielded the entire castle, and Michael chuckled, mentioning that the interruption spell was working again. In his mind, he acknowledged that it was Michael who had control over it and doubted that the second prince had any knowledge of the first prince's playful manipulation of security, as Luke Wynn probably had no way of knowing. They shook hands, and Adrian expressed his honor at meeting the crown prince. Michael replied that it was an honor to meet Adrian and Arsha. The butler approached Michael, inquiring if he was back, and Michael confirmed it. He asked the butler to prepare a meal as he was going to have lunch with his guests. The butler assured him that he'd prepare it right away. Adrian was amazed, observing the butler, thinking that people with high-end talents seemed to move around as if it were nothing. Adrian asked Michael if it was his palace, and Michael, while offering them juices, confirmed that it was. He mentioned that the palace's chef was hired personally, ensuring that he was one of the finest chefs in the country. Adrian acknowledged the importance of good food. Michael then asked Adrian if he knew that he followed him on social media, leaving Adrian surprised. Michael showed him his own social media account, which featured the overpowered closed eyes profile picture. Adrian was shocked by this revelation and admitted that he hadn't expected the crown prince to have a social media presence. Michael explained that many nobles look down on the virtual world, but he was an exception as he enjoyed it. Adrian knew that Michael van Reinhardt held the title of crown prince, but he treated him like a best friend. It felt genuine, unlike the second prince's behavior towards him. Adrian commented that Michael had a sense of humor, to which Michael responded that he did and that he enjoyed reading Adrian's posts mocking the Raven Margrave. Adrian was surprised and asked if Michael had seen his posts because they had significantly helped him gain followers. Michael suggested that it was probably Adrian's looks that played a significant role in gaining followers. Adrian proudly acknowledged that, indeed, his appearance was a contributing factor. Michael laughed and agreed, saying that he knew Adrian was a handsome person. Arsha paid no attention to their banter and was focused on the food in front of her. Adrian asked Michael how he couldn't be aware of his own handsomeness when he saw his fan club greeting him upon entering the castle. Michael laughed again and admitted that Adrian was right. As they began eating, Adrian inquired about the reason for their invitation. Michael replied with a question, asking if Adrian didn't already know. Adrian responded that he had assumed they were being recruited, to which Michael agreed. Adrian asked Michael about his expectations and what he could offer to them. Michael regretfully replied that he didn't have anything to offer at the moment. Adrian inquired if Michael planned to provide benefits once he ascended to the throne, to which Michael confirmed that he would. However, he also mentioned that he wouldn't obstruct Adrian from obtaining the Viscount title. Michael explained that the Viscount title wasn't something easily granted, and it was particularly challenging at that time due to the division of power. He also noted that it seemed like Luke Wynn had promised him the title, thinking he had enough authority to do so. However, if the people on Luke Wynn's side disagreed, they could prevent Adrian from acquiring the title, which made perfect sense. Adrian understood that Michael couldn't offer him the title as Luke Wynn had done because Michael recognized it was an empty promise, and no one would simply allow the other party to grow stronger without opposition. Michael's statement about not stopping him from obtaining the Viscount title essentially implied that he would support Adrian in securing the title while aligning with the second prince's side. Michael suggested that Adrian would obtain the title by joining Luke Wynn's side, and his side wouldn't oppose it, making it an easy process. Adrian responded by saying he would take whatever he could get, and Michael invited him to join his side. Adrian considered the offer and realized that the real wildcard was the choice he made to gain an advantage. If he accepted Michael's offer, he could obtain the title and align with the first prince. If he declined, his title would be at risk and he would have to align with the second prince. He informed Michael that he had more choices, but there was only one answer. Michael asked him what he meant, and Adrian replied that he would do as the crown prince instructed. Michael asked Adrian if he was certain that he didn't need more time to think, and Adrian replied that he was sure. He believed that he deserved the throne more than the second prince. Michael reminded him that he couldn't simply make those claims to obtain the title and then remain on the second prince's side. Adrian stated that he couldn't betray his followers, and he had no intention of doing so, as he believed the first prince would likely win against the second prince even without his support. Michael responded with a cheerful nice, while Arsha continued to enjoy her meal. Michael turned to Arsha and inquired about her choice. Adrian noticed that the first prince's interest was different from the second prince's more malicious demeanor, which made him feel better. He asked Arsha for her thoughts, and she replied that as long as Adrian was okay with it, she would follow. Adrian asked if she truly meant it, even though he expected her response, and he still felt somewhat awkward. Michael cheered for them, commenting that they looked good together. This made Adrian turn as red as a tomato and plead with Michael to stop. A little later, when it was time for dessert, Adrian told Michael that he had a question. He mentioned that he was fine with joining Luke Wynn's side and obtaining the title, but he asked Michael if he thought Luke Wynn might become suspicious if he didn't show any resistance. Michael responded affirmatively, explaining that he planned to pretend to resist it initially and then back down later. Adrian realized it was a clever way to avoid arousing suspicion. However, he also suggested that, instead of ending it like that, he should receive something in return for allowing him to win the title. Michael was taken aback and asked for examples. Adrian smiled, thinking that he had the chance to not only back down but also gain some leverage over Luke Wynn. Then he told Michael that Raven Margrave had suffered a great loss for messing with him, and Raven lost 40% of his power due to his personal feelings while taking a major role in national defense. Consequently, he believed that Raven didn't deserve the Margrave title. Michael asked if he meant taking away the title from Raven for giving up the Viscount title, to which he replied that he considered it a fair deal. Demoting Raven Margrave to Earl would inflict significant damage on Luke Wynn's side. Michael suggested that it seemed like a personal matter, and he admitted that he wouldn't deny it. He derived satisfaction from damaging his feud and having an opportunity to control Raven, making it clear that he couldn't miss that chance. Michael then inquired what would happen if Luke Wynn rejected the deal, and he responded that promoting one of his men to Margrave would also be a good option. He explained that he had earned the Viscount title as a reward for his merits in war, and it was a good time to promote one of the earls on his side who had also performed admirably in war. He emphasized the significant difference between a new person becoming a Viscount to support the second prince and an earl on the first prince's side becoming a Margrave. He also noted that he could be a Viscount who possessed an Aura Master, implying that if Michael accepted the plan and everything went smoothly, they could maximize their profits from his betrayal. However, he noticed Michael's suspicion and confusion but was also intrigued by Michael's reaction, prompting him to wonder why. He called Michael to get his attention, and Michael apologized, explaining that he was a little surprised. Michael then asked him if he could reveal who he had met on the second prince's side before meeting him. He observed Michael's keen green eye, which shocked him, and he revealed that he had met Baron Walker, who had guided him, Prince Luke Wynn, Viscount Hamilton, and 6 other inspectors for his interrogation, totaling 9 people. He glanced at Michael and pondered if he had made a mistake. He then noticed that Michael's suspicious demeanor had transformed into curiosity, which led him to understand what was happening. He told Michael that he now understood and was thinking along the same lines as him, causing Michael to laugh and ask if he could read other people's minds since he had quickly grasped his betrayal plan. He acknowledged that he couldn't directly read someone's mind but could make assumptions through his glasses. Michael became confused, concerned that there was a chance his plan had leaked because he had discussed it word by word without explicitly mentioning it. Michael told him that it was amazing and that he had been considering those 2 plans as well. He admitted that he had suggested a plan he had already formulated, which was impressive, and he felt embarrassed. Michael reassured him not to be embarrassed because it showcased his excellent decision-making abilities. Achieving the 7th circle at the age of 20 was not an accomplishment just anyone could claim. Michael also expressed his desire not to be his enemy and suggested that they should remain friends. They both laughed, silently agreeing with the sentiment. Moments later, Michael handed him a gadget, and he accepted it while inquiring if it was a communication device. Michael confirmed it and explained that it was a secure device that couldn't be bugged. He informed him that he would contact him on that device if there was more to discuss and thanked him for the helpful and joyful meal, clicking the device in his hand. Transportation magic appeared beneath them, and just before they were transported, Michael told him that they would meet again. He replied that he looked forward to it, and with that, they vanished, leaving Michael alone in his chamber. A minute later, they found themselves in a different location. He asked Arsha where they were, and she replied that they were in storage near the entrance, revealing that it was a place Michael had taken care of. He wondered how many similar places Michael had. Realizing Michael was a meticulous person, he suggested they leave the storage, and Arsha followed him. As they were about to exit, he spotted Billiam and Lopez in the storage, both holding a variety of items. They were equally surprised to see him and greeted him with respect, concealing the objects they were holding behind them. Curious, he asked them what they were hiding behind their backs. However, Arsha tapped him to get his attention and pointed to miniature figurines of him and her scattered throughout the storage. He was astonished to see that in Reinhardt Kingdom's Star, figurines of himself and Arsha had been stocked for sale in souvenir stores inside the castle. Arsha noticed the paper bags Billiam and Lopez were holding and asked them if they were purchases, to which Lopez shyly replied no. Billiam explained that they had merely been admiring the figurines. Meanwhile, on the internet, the trending news reported that Freya's empire's debt-to-GDP ratio had increased by 12% within the year, and there was severe corruption that had made Recess Island hesitant to consider introducing a republic. The economy showing signs of inflation had taken a backseat as the Freest Republic focused solely on its military strength. The hope of the Freest Republic rested in the hands of a lucky encounter, which the president's son, Louis Fairmont, had obtained. A question arose about whether the lucky encounter of Archduke Lucas acquired by the president's son was even real. Someone clenched their teeth furiously, shouting as they questioned whether Archduke Lucas's supposed lucky encounter had fallen into the hands of these clueless individuals. In the Brigham Empire's palace, Gold Dragon Castle, Emperor Edward Noah Brigham passionately declared that they deserved the lucky encounter, asserting that Manuel Lucas' home country was the nation that had led Rondel into its golden age. Edward urged the people around him to speak up, questioning whether they were not investing enough effort and funds into the search for the lucky encounter. Despite their apologies, he expressed frustration and summoned the Director of Information. Earl Alfred, a member of the Seventh Circle, affirmed Edward's inquiry, prompting him to ask for her thoughts on the claims made by the Freest Empire. She calmly opened her red eyes and expressed a view that it was a 50-50 situation, leaving Edward curious about her reasoning. Alfred explained that she had assessed their exploration methods, finding their approach outdated compared to their own. Additionally, the discovery of the lucky encounter had occurred in an unexpected and seemingly random location. If this was something discoverable, it should have been found years ago. Crucially, she highlighted that they had no knowledge of the core of the lucky encounter, including the ciphertext Archduke Lucas had hinted at in English. The fact that the lucky encounter was found without deciphering these hints seemed illogical, suggesting either the hints were misleading or there was more to the discovery than met the eye. Edward questioned why she still offered a 50-50 chance considering these suspicious circumstances. Alfred proposed two possibilities: either the hints by Archduke Lucas were mere diversions, or someone had already found the real lucky encounter, drawing in the Freest Empire to mislead others. Edward wondered why someone with the real discovery would create distractions instead of remaining hidden. Alfred theorized that the individual might have been exposed or was an unknown variable, prompting the need to explore all potential scenarios thoroughly. Edward fell silent in frustration. Concluding, Edward suggested the possibility that the real owner of the lucky encounter might indeed exist, orchestrating a grand deception to mislead the Freest Empire. Such an elaborate ruse would require manipulation at a national level, narrowing down the potential suspects to 4 possible nations. Edward listed the potential culprits: the Croatian Empire, the Elysia Allies, Lucia's Kingdom, and Reinhardt Kingdom, expressing a higher suspicion toward the Elysia Allies due to the capabilities of the elves in manipulating situations. He had also heard news from the Reinhardt Kingdom. Earl informed Edward about a young man who had achieved the Seventh Circle at the age of 20, causing a stir in the country. This prodigious individual had amassed assets of 60 trillion through investments. Edward found this exceptionally unusual and suspiciously talented. Earl added that no single person would likely possess the power to orchestrate everything. Additionally, the Lucia's Kingdom had acknowledged him as one of their own, and investigations into his investments hadn't revealed any ties to the lucky encounter. Edward found this intriguing and questioned if it was all accomplished solely by the individual's talent, wondering about the possibility. Earl recalled that their empire had, long ago, harbored someone with talents surpassing even Adrian Lawrence. Edward acknowledged this and noted that the Reinhardt Kingdom was already entangled in succession conflicts, making it seemingly illogical for them to orchestrate such a scheme. Earl suggested ranking the potential culprits as the Elysia Allies, Lucia's Kingdom, Reinhardt Kingdom, and the Croatian Empire. Edward commanded an increase in surveillance on royals and nobles in that order, and they complied as instructed. He further instructed his people to send a stern warning to the Empire laying claim to Archduke Lucas' lucky encounter, asserting it was their nation's property. If they disregarded the warning, it would escalate into a threat, showcasing their power to the world. Everyone agreed to this strategy. Edward brazenly declared that sacrificing one country to acquire Archduke Lucas' lucky encounter was a small price to pay. He stood up, indicating there was one more action to take. When asked, he ordered Earl to attempt to contact the young man in Reinhardt. She inquired about the nature of this contact. Edward instructed her to propose immigration, suggesting that becoming an earl in their empire would be more beneficial for the young man than his current situation. In a castle, shocking rumors circulated among the nobles about Adrian. They heard that Adrian had imprisoned and ultimately killed his half-brother and mother in a flying fortress because they had troubled him. The audience was stunned into horror upon hearing these accounts. One of them questioned the veracity of the rumors, while another described Adrian as a lunatic who had callously observed his family's demise, even posting celebratory images online while drinking wine. One of the men exclaimed that had they known this, they wouldn't have dared to cross paths with Adrian. Another individual expressed surprise, remarking that they had seen Adrian as merely arrogant without any substance, never realizing he was the Duke of Riverdale's disciple. A concerned lady inquired about their safety, considering Adrian's prowess as a grand wizard, and the presence of an aura master, speculating that both might soon receive the Earl title. A man among the nobles emphasized that this union of 2 earls and 1 viscount consolidated a significant power base, almost rivaling that of a margrave or marquis. He questioned if this aggregation of influence wasn't excessive for a new aristocrat. However, a lady among them dismissed their concerns. Isabella Cascable points out that Margrave Raven's struggles stemmed from Adrian's reckless intrusion with his troops. She queried whether it would have been an equal match in a direct confrontation. Agreeing with her sentiment, one of the men supported her standpoint. Another member asked if she wasn't worried, given that she particularly antagonized Adrian. However, she rebuked them, labeling them as cowards and urging them to employ common sense. She emphasized that the times had changed and they need not tremble in fear because of a single grand wizard and an aura master. She expounded on the strengths of their defenses, indicating that the flying fortress could withstand multiple attacks from a grand wizard. Furthermore, with the right strategy and sufficient forces, they could neutralize the Aura Master. She pointed out that, in essence, their combined power was not significantly different from an alliance comprising a Margrave family, an Earl, and 4 Viscounts, urging the nobles not to underestimate their strength, silencing further discussion. One of the nobles acknowledged that it would indeed be challenging to directly harm Adrian if he were to acquire the title of an Earl. Another noble agreed, sharing the insight that if Adrian did become an Earl, he would be a high aristocrat in name only for a while. Realizing that their fear was unfounded, they began to tease each other, lightening the mood. Isabella expressed her exasperation at their apprehension toward Adrian, calling them foolish. When asked why they were scared, one noble explained it was because they lacked a prestigious background like hers. The nobles continued to jest with each other, but Isabella's watch suddenly lit up. She stood up and informed them that she needed to leave. A man asked why she was leaving as they were just starting, mentioning that a person named Lotus had gone to the Elysia Allies and obtained valuable medicine. Isabella replied that her father had called, making it impossible for her to stay this time. The lady encouraged her to return quickly after completing her business, to which Isabella promised she would try. As Isabella left the room, her thoughts turned to Adrian. She remembered his striking silver hair and blue eyes, a standout appearance even among their classmates at the academy. She recalled a day when Adrian had become furious, asking them what they were doing. She calmly told him that he had chosen to be there and that the commoner had offended her. 2 other ladies whispered to each other, noting that Adrian had never responded to anything until that moment. They speculated whether it was because he shared a humble background with the commoner. Isabella smugly asked Adrian if he was glad to learn that making fun of an aristocrat would lead to dire consequences. Adrian responded by vowing to torment her in the most terrible way possible and make her regret being born into that world. Isabella laughed at the memory and reflected on her fondness for Adrian, especially when she saw his handsome face twist in anger. She arrogantly wondered what a mere earl without a political base could do to her, as she dominated the social circle within the 6th Margrave family. However, her thoughts took a sharp turn when she asked her father, Margrave Cascable, what he had just said. Her father, an ally of the 2nd Prince, Luke Wynne, revealed that Luke had promised Adrian the title of a Marquis. Cascable explained that Luke Wynne believed Adrian was well worth it, given that he had become a 7th Circle wizard at the age of 20, making it possible for him to reach the status of an 8th Circle Great Wizard in the future. Additionally, Adrian possessed the talent of a Grand Master, equivalent to an 8th Circle wizard. His presence was crucial for shifting the balance in their favor, and it was advantageous to have someone of such influence on their side. Cascable conveyed his desire for Isabella to use her position in society to establish a friendship with Adrian. The best-case scenario would be for her to marry him, leaving Isabella in a state of silent realization that this would be a challenging task. Shortly after, she rushed down the corridor, her mind racing with the realization that Adrian had become the 6th Marquis of Reinhardt. She understood that while an Earl and a Marquis were only 1 rank apart, the difference in their political influence was immeasurable. She worried about the implications this had for her future. Frantically, she opened the door and called out loudly for her friends, but she was stunned to find them inebriated and reveling in a party. It became clear to her that these friends would be of no assistance in her current predicament. Meanwhile, within the game, Arsha's hair underwent a transformation, turning into a shining white hue. She asked Adrian if this change was acceptable, and he complimented her, saying that it looked good on her. After returning from the royal palace to express his gratitude, Adrian had logged back into Chronicle. To avoid the presence of a character bearing a striking resemblance to the celebrity Arsha, he decided to give her this simple disguise by altering her hair color to white. Moments later, someone inquired if he was contemplating entering the military industry. When Perseus turned to look at the person, he was taken aback by the individual's presence. Perseus questioned the man's behavior in front of Adrian, but the man retorted by asking about Perseus's own behavior. This man was a Grand Nocturne and a first-time accountant, 22 years old, affiliated with the Green Accounting Office and the Kingdom of Reinhardt's. He possessed high skills in intellectual ability, administrative power, and academic ability, with low political power. His attributed quality was quick analysis, and his relationships were marked by interest and alliance. His current status was deemed surprising. Adrian was astonished to see that Perseus's son shared 3 high-ranking abilities identical to those of his father. He inquired about the reasons behind this similarity. The man explained that the industries they had taken over, such as cult steel manufacturing, zenith artifacts, Kania magic towers, and Patnic mana, were akin to hippos that didn't yield immediate profits but instead consumed capital. Adrian had acquired all 5 of these companies, and the man believed that it was a strategic move for future investment. Adrian grinned, acknowledging the man's astute observation. He told the man that while the mining and distribution industries, the primary sectors of their Lawrence estate, were viable, they had clear growth limitations. Hence, he saw the military industry as a promising venture in that regard. The man expressed his surprise, remarking that the plan seemed fitting for a grand wizard. He asked Adrian if he might know what specific items he had in mind, but Adrian countered with a question, wondering if the man's inquiry stemmed from mere curiosity. The man clarified that he sought to understand the priorities for future instructions. Perseus, in response, sighed lightly. Adrian smiled and indicated they would begin with vanguard equipment, leaving both Perseus and the man astonished. Perseus inquired if it was feasible, to which Adrian confirmed that they had a grasp of the Force System's principles and a rough manufacturing method for the vanguard equipment. As long as their assistants followed these guidelines diligently, the production was indeed possible. Adrian knew that the manufacturing of Vanguard Force equipment was currently in the hands of 3 powerful families in the Kingdom of Reinhardt: the second prince's mother's family, the Duke of Etterheim, the current king's mother's family, and the distinguished magic master, the Duke of Haines, along with the House of Reinhardt's. Essentially, this indicated that the creation of Vanguard Force equipment was orchestrated by the most influential figures in the kingdom. Interpreting it differently, he believed that if they could produce such equipment, they could stand on equal ground with these formidable entities. The man expressed concern about the existing power's potential reactions. Adrian reassured him, stating that he had contemplated the response after visiting the royal palace. He explained that if they initially produced force equipment similar to or slightly less potent than the existing ones, the threats wouldn't be severe. Adrian noted that creating Vanguard Force equipment wasn't a feat achievable by just any Grand Wizard. In the Kingdom of Reinhardt's, there were 4 Grand Wizards apart from him, but only 2 had the capability to craft force equipment. Thus, a sudden appearance of a 20-year-old Grand Wizard manufacturing Vanguard Force equipment was certain to attract public attention and would lead to a partial diversion of strength, inevitably resulting in some failures. Adrian informed them that he wouldn't settle for the current level of Vanguard equipment, expressing his intent to be informed as soon as a good magic tower became available for purchase. Perseus and his son were initially confused about Adrian's dissatisfaction with the Vanguard's equipment, but they soon realized it pertained to the flying fortresses. Their relationship with Adrian shifted from mere respect and admiration, and status of goodwill and loyalty. Both of them enthusiastically assured Adrian of their commitment, to which he replied that he looked forward to their efforts. Rayford, taken aback, let the tea drool from his mouth in shock and queried Adrian about his reference to the title of Marquis. He reminded his father that he had agreed to accept the second prince's offer, thinking to himself that he shouldn't disclose Michael's proposal to his father, as maintaining strict secrecy was crucial to avoid potential betrayal. Rayford expressed his dismay, stating that nothing had unfolded as expected since his return from the battlefield. His mother also expressed concerns, fearing that her son might ascend to nobility, and inquired if it was all right. Adrian explained that an earl held the same noble status as a marquis, but his mother worriedly pointed out the differences in their hierarchical levels. Sighing, Adrian pondered that despite his mother's experience as the hostess of a viscount, she still struggled to adapt. He humorously questioned the significance of becoming a marquis, stating that he'd need to ascend to the position of a king in a country and establish a harem to be content. However, to his surprise, his father reacted angrily and his mother appeared pale, leaving Adrian confused about their responses. His father passionately questioned the absurdity of his remarks, particularly with his lover sitting beside him. Realizing that he had portrayed Arsha as his lover for convenience, though their relationship was not of that nature, he hastily attempted to retract his words, claiming it was a jest. However, his father sternly advised him against joking about certain matters. Adrian suggested his father observe Arsha's reaction, but found her status to be complex and subtle. In a momentary blink, her status seemed to return to normal, adding to his confusion. His mother advised him to treat Arsha well and not to look at her differently without reason. He nodded in agreement and offered an apology to Arsha, who continued eating without any visible reaction. Feeling awkward, Adrian cleared his throat and proposed they address an impending important task that had been postponed, intending to mark a fresh start for the Lawrence family. His father inquired about the delay, to which Adrian clarified that it referred to dealing with the employees who had caused harm to him and his mother. He intended to cleanse the situation both internally and externally. The next day, in the royal castle, someone told the king that not even a margrave, but a marquis, was too much for such a situation. However, someone shouted that it was not too much. Adrian was not only a rare genius who became a grand wizard at the age of 20 but also an expert in economics who had built tens of trillions of wealth on his own. Then the men shouted that it was right, and even with Adrian's achievements in that war alone, they were more than enough to bestow upon Adrian the title of a viscount or baronet, so they should take it into account. Then another man added that Adrian also had the aura master Arsha as his fiancée. If Adrian left for another country that treated him better, they would lose Arsha as well. The other side still asked if there shouldn't be equity. Luke Wynn, a man, responded that, on the contrary, it was against equity to give Arsha only the title of a countess given Adrian's great achievements. Luke Wynn told the king that many countries were already trying to approach Adrian because they had fallen for Adrian's talents, and some people even said that Adrian was the person who would become the next Archduke Lucas. Thus, half-hearted treatment was akin to abandoning a competent young man who would lead the future of their kingdom. However, Michael told the king that he knew that in almost 200 years, there had not been a case of someone with no title becoming a marquis at once. Luke Wynn argued that he had won over Adrian, and he had no other intention than to empower Adrian. This made Luke Wynn angry, and he asked Michael if his words were too much. Michael just asked him why they needed to sugarcoat their discussion and whether Luke Wynn thought he'd allow it so easily, even if Adrian was a figure that could benefit him. Luke Wynn furiously asked Michael what he meant and told him that he wanted him to understand how inappropriate his comment was, considering his position as the crown prince. Michael told Luke Wynn that if he accepted their request, they would accept his argument. Their request was that they should let Earl Raven step down from his position as a margrave. Luke Wynn asked Michael if he was suggesting that they should give up their existing influence to gain new influence, and Michael replied that he didn't think it was a bad suggestion because Margrave Raven could maintain his position as an earl. He asked Luke Wynn if it wouldn't simply be adding another marquis. Luke Wynn shouted that it was not possible, and he could never do something so despicable as risking the well-being of his people for personal gain. This was how people trusted and followed him. Michael laughed and told Luke Wynn that he was quite amazing, just as he expected from a leader. Michael thought that, as he had anticipated, Luke Wynn refused the proposal due to the nature of the second prince. He didn't believe the proposal would be accepted. He told Luke Wynn that if that was the case, he'd make a new proposal. Michael expressed hope that Earl Otis, who made a significant contribution as Adrian's superior during the war, would be appointed as a margrave, which surprised and confused Otis. Michael then addressed everyone and admitted that Adrian had made a great contribution to the war, but it was no exaggeration to say that about half of the credit belonged to Adrian's immediate superior, Otis. Michael suggested this in response to the rather unreasonable marquisate proposal, and as a way to overlook Margrave Raven's mistakes. Luke Wynn fell silent. The king intervened and put an end to their debate, making a decision. The king announced that they would accept the requests of Crown Prince Michael and Prince Luke Wynn, to which both princes thanked the king. A few days later, on the day of the victory celebration, Sylvia excitedly exclaimed that it was the place as she looked at the grand royal castle. She then asked Adrian if she looked weird and if her dress was too flashy. He reassured his mother not to worry about it and mentioned that there were probably many esteemed sons who would ask her for a dance without knowing she was a noblewoman. Sylvia commented that Arsha would look good in a dress, but Arsha told her that she liked her outfit very much. Sylvia explained that there was going to be an official ceremony, but she hoped they had time to change into a dress before the party began. Suddenly, some nobles appeared in front of Adrian in surprise, and he recognized them as Viscount Doherty, Viscount Parma, Viscount Karma, and Viscount Ronier. He noted that those were the faces he had missed and inquired where their master had gone. One of them sweetly asked him what was wrong and reminded him that they were also alumni, but he turned around and told them that he'd visit them later when he had time and that they should enjoy themselves. This left them confused, but Ronier mentioned that Isabella would be arriving later as well. Sylvia asked if they were Adrian's friends, and he replied that they were his academy classmates. Doherty asked if they noticed Arsha's gaze because she seemed as if she were going to kill him. Karma responded that it seemed like Adrian hadn't forgotten them, and Parma said he was getting annoyed, asking if Isabella should cover for them again this time. Karma agreed and said it would be fine because there was nothing aristocrats could do. Ronier suggested that they should find Isabella first and ask why she couldn't reach her, without knowing Arsha is listening to them. Arsha asked Adrian if she should kill them, but he told her not yet because he had made a promise to them. Later, the man welcomed them to Lawrence's household and informed them that he would show them to their seats. Then the man offered them seats in the front row, making them realize that these were VIP front row table seats. Suddenly, someone inquired if they were the Lawrence Viscounts. The nobles began to surround them, congratulating them for seizing this opportunity, and asking Sylvia where she had purchased her jewels because they were as beautiful as her elegant dress, which suited her well. A man told Rayford that it had been a long time since he last met him and wondered if he might be interested in visiting their estate. The nobles surrounding them made him guess that the high-ranking nobles were aware of his marquis title. He was then shocked to notice Margrave Raven, who gazed at him with a dagger in his eyes. He suspected that Raven had been warned by Luke Wynn, who was discreetly keeping his distance. Later, the host announced that the victory celebration would commence, and the king proclaimed that Count Otis would be honored with the Order of the Golden Lion, the border city of Ort, and the appointment as a frontier Margrave to Iges. He was pleased to see that Earl Otis was also on the Crown Prince's side. However, he noticed Luke Wynn whispering something to the man beside him and guessed that the man next to Luke Wynn was undoubtedly the kingdom's most famous swordmaster, Marquis Vincent. He also observed that the aura masters in the country were very interested in Arsha, but as expected, she didn't match the second prince. A moment later, the king summoned him and Arsha to come forward and ordered them to kneel, which they did. The king announced that he was bestowing upon him the title of Marquis and the Marinkov area as his estate. Arsha was granted the title of Countess and the Glendale area as her estate. Additionally, they were each given a fortified fortress. The king hoped they would do their best to protect their country. They both expressed their gratitude to the king, while the nobles whispered about Adrian Title's sudden elevation to Marquis, and asked if there had ever been a case of someone becoming a Marquis so suddenly. The king inquired if he had anything to say. He then addressed the nobles, expressing his gratitude to the king, the heart and fair administration of the country, as well as the crown and second princes. He revealed that as a new aristocrat with an estate, he had a wish to fulfill. He called Doherty, Parma, Karma, and Ronier and declared a cooperative effort to wage war on estates involving these four families. The king, the princes, and his parents were shocked and asked him to explain, but he simply smiled calmly. Calitz van Reinhardt, the king of the Reinhardt kingdom, had been growing increasingly concerned in recent days. His worry centered around the issue of selecting a successor, a decision divided between his two sons, Crown Prince Michael and Second Prince Luke Wynn. To compound his worries, a new eccentric individual had emerged in the country. A moment later, Luke Wynn angrily confronted him, stating that he must have misunderstood Marquis Lawrence's character. He had initially believed Lawrence to be a typical scholarly type but was taken aback by his aggressiveness. Luke Wynn inquired if he was aware that a new lord couldn't expand his territory for 1 year. In response, Adrian mentioned that if that were the case, he would simply dismantle those four families and revert the territory to the royal decree. Luke Wynn asked if he had no intention of backing down, to which he firmly replied in the affirmative. Luke Wynn patted his shoulder, realizing that trying to dissuade him would be futile, and expressed his disappointment with his behavior. He suggested that they wait and see what unfolds. Adrian had expected such a reaction from Luke Wynn but still wondered whether Luke Wynn would be successful in driving him out. They then left the room, and Adrian wondered if the real party had started. Arsha appeared and informed him that she had been waiting for him. However, he noticed that people were avoiding him, and he realized that even before the event had begun, everyone had exchanged greetings and expressed a desire to be friends, but now no one was approaching them. He thought it seemed like he had been labeled as a troublemaker and commented that it felt as though he had become the black sheep of the family. His father, Rayford, shouted at him, confirming his feelings. Adrian explained to his father that he had not initially planned to go to such extremes but had been provoked, and he apologized to his father. Rayford asked him why he had done it, and he replied that it was for revenge, causing Rayford to touch his nose in frustration. Rayford then advised him that taking on 4 families simultaneously would undoubtedly be dangerous and inquired if he had considered the risks when declaring a territory war. Adrian responded that he had been fully aware of the risks and reassured his father not to worry. Rayford sighed and expressed his trust in him, while his mother anxiously observed them. His father added that it had been a long time since he had attended a party hosted by the royal family, and he intended to enjoy it. Rayford addressed Sylvia, his wife, telling her not to worry and to have faith in their capable son. Sylvia nodded, and Sylvia accepted his hand, all while smiling, knowing that Rayford had been treading carefully around Anna all this time. But he was aware that he would now look after his mother just as diligently. He turned back to the nobles and asked if they should continue with what they were doing. Meanwhile, on the side, someone shouted that even territory wars should have valid reasons and asked if it made sense. Karma questioned if their actions were the reason, and Ronia replied that those were merely their childish actions from their youth. Suddenly, Parma inquired if they would lose, leaving everyone confused. However, Parma asked once again if they couldn't unite as the 4 families when Adrian declared war. Ronier acknowledged that it was true, but their opponent was a marquis. Parma suggested they calm down first, emphasizing that, although they were smaller in comparison to Isabella, they were a noble family with a viscounty. Combining the strength of these 4 families should be sufficient to deal with a newly appointed marquis. Doherty panicked and asked if that was the case. Ronier explained to Parma that it was true. With their 4 families uniting, their combined power would be greater than that of a viscount but less than that of a margrave. Karma exclaimed that it sounded entirely plausible. However, Adrian suddenly appeared behind her, energetically greeting them, leaving them shocked and calling his name. He questioned how they dared to address the Marquis by his name in such a casual manner. Parma shouted back, telling him not to make him laugh and asking if he thought they would respect him after he had declared the territory war. Adrian removed his gloves, declaring that he would make them respect him, and tossed his gloves at Parma's face. He challenged Parma to a duel, but someone behind him informed him that he was not allowed to participate in that duel. The man, along with 3 others, told him that he had provoked them first and explained that, given the significant differences between the 2 parties, a duel could not be sanctioned under national law. Adrian smiled, acknowledging their quick response, and mentioned that it was unfortunate because if they had let him behead young Master Parma, he would have spared them from the territory war. The man questioned the nature of his relationship with his son, expressing concern that he might be going too far. Adrian retorted that he wasn't going too far and claimed to have a clear relationship with his son, implying that if he lost something, he expected it to be repaid. The man asked for clarification, and Adrian suggested he inquire about the details from his son, Parma. Then he told them that the announcement letter of the territory war should arrive within a week. Unless they wished to have their family suffer because of their foolish son, arrest that guy and bring him before him. The man asked him if he was telling him to sell his son off and told him that he keeps crossing the line. But he just peeked while asking if it is so, and then he saw Isabella hiding behind in fear. Then he walked away while telling them that they'll see them on the battlefield. Parma fearfully called his father, but his father just told him that they should go back and talk. Parma was shocked to see someone and called Isabella, who was hiding behind and shaking in fear. Parma asked her why she only appeared now, and Parma begged her to speak to his father, but she was lost in her thoughts, wondering what in the world is going on. Meanwhile, on social media, the news wrote that the new Marquis Adrian Lawrence declared a territory war against the 4 viscounties as soon as he was given the title. The new Marquis' fighting spirit embarrassed even His Majesty the King, leading to the question of why Marquis Lawrence took such action, ruining the atmosphere of the commemorative event. Marquis Lawrence's ill-fated relationship with the 4 families dates back to his school days. Then he read the comment saying that he was a victim of school violence and group bullying, and someone replied that it was severe, to the point that there wasn't a day he walked around without injury. The commenter replied that he heard he was from a noble family, so he wondered why he was so pitiful, and someone replied that he was only a noble on paper, but he has lived a life worse than a commoner. Also, he suffered an assassination attempt at home and was bullied and violently assaulted at school, so he respected him for becoming an archmage under those circumstances, making him realize that there was no secret in that current world, and it revealed itself without him having to leak that to the media himself. Also, with it, there wouldn't be any problem with the justifications of the territory war. But that situation aside, he couldn't believe that so many people were rooting for him even when he induced that situation, which is so touching for him. But then a man called him, making him snap, and asked the man what he was saying. The man replied that they were informing him of the specifications of the Sky Fortress that could be shipped immediately. Then the man gave him a book and explained to him that it was the catalog of the Sky Fortress. He looked at it, thinking that, as he expected, the Sky Fortress was really expensive, and that was why they said they'd be dreaming of having one sky castle in the territory. He knows that people look at him and say that he's reckless. They also say it was illogical for him to engage in a territory war when they didn't yet have proper military power, but it was obvious that they were mistaken about something. If they ran out of military power, shouldn't they just buy some more to make up for it? Then he told the man that he'd buy everything. He knows that as of now, he has 48 trillion in cash. If he adds together the property confiscated from the vassals belonging to the Margrave Raven faction, including Anna and Cedric, and their family's assets, the amount easily adds up to 70 trillion. Additionally, if he adds installments based on his credit rating, the man told him that the transaction amount is so large that half of the selling price must be paid in advance. He tells the man that he paid a lot of taxes recently and asks if he can get some tax exemption, while Arsha, next to him, is just thinking about cake. The man shook his hand and thanked him for his purchase. He smiled, knowing that even if he had just bought 8 sky fortresses, he still had 20 trillion in change. He thought it was too big of a deal that it didn't feel real. Even if he excludes the prepayment, he'll be paying a whopping 50 trillion in installments. But then, Otis saw them, and he was surprised to see Otis too. He excitedly calls Otis a Margrave, and Otis excitedly calls him Marquis. He tells Otis to speak comfortably and asks him if they aren't going to the battlefield together, but Otis tells him that he is the Marquis and asks if he may do it. He tells Otis that he can't if he was Earl Otis, but he can if he was Margrave Otis, making Otis laugh hard. But then Otis remembers something and asks him what the meaning is he is coming there. Then he replied that he just purchased all the sky fortresses, making Otis shout that, as he expected. Otis tells him that he has no other choice but to make a reservation. But he expects it too because now that Otis has become a Margrave, the military power restrictions have been lifted to the level of a Marquis, and Otis must be there to try to buy additional sky fortresses. Then he asked him if it was his first time seeing her and introduced his daughter that he was talking about, making him remember that she was the famous one for being a lunatic. Michelle gracefully introduced herself to Adrian and smiled at them like a shining blue rose. He greeted her back and introduced his fiancée, Arsha, to Michelle, to which Arsha bowed gracefully while he was confused because according to the rumors, Michelle is a psycho with a bad reputation, but she doesn't look like one at all. Then he sees her status that her talents are exploration, which is very high, learning power, and intellectual ability, which are high. Her traits are English interpretation and reasoning ability. Her relationships are interested and neutral, and her current status is favor and fascinated. But then he was shocked to see one of her talents and read it over and over again in shock, wondering what it was and if it was the English that he knows of. Then, Otis tells him that until recently, Michelle was working hard to find Archduke Lucas's fate. However, as he may know too, it appeared in the Prius Republic. So, Michelle has been falling into despair because of it, and he has been dragging her around with him here and there himself. Michelle kicks her father's foot while reminding her father that she told him the fate in the Prius Republic is fake. Adrian couldn't believe that the one looking for Archduke Lucas's fate had an English interpretation, making him realize that if he didn't have the cheat key of being born on Earth, Michelle might have been the one to get her hands on fate instead of him. He tells Michelle that it was interesting that she thinks the fate found in the Prius Republic was fake. She explained to him that the fate exists, but it was hidden in a location that no one knows, and it was not something they can find by ignorantly wandering around the Prius Republic. He asks her which secret location she is talking about, and she replies that the details are a secret, but she can tell him that it is a location that is bound to be difficult to find if they were a noble. He smiled, knowing that it was Hollywood because certainly, nobles often think of Hollywood as a virtual reality system, a place for commoners to escape from reality and fantasize. As a result, it naturally became a difficult place to find for any nobles. He wonders what the deal is with Michelle and he thinks she just made a faint prediction. But he wonders how close she is to fate. Michelle tells him that she plays online diaries and asks him if he may follow and subscribe to her. He replies, of course, and tells her that she is welcome too. She tells him that it is an honor and that she likes people who are self-made, like him, Marquis, and Countess Arsha. Then she swings her hair toward her ears while telling him that she'd love to chat together sometimes and asks him what he thinks. He smiles and replies that he'd love to as well, so he shall send her an invitation as soon as possible. Then Otis and Michelle bow at him in courtesy to say goodbye. Afterward, Arsha asks him if she should kill Michelle, and he replies no, telling Arsha that they should watch over Michelle for a bit longer. He looks at Michelle Otis, who is excitedly telling her dad that she has followed Adrian, and he knows that he'll need to watch over Michelle for a bit more. Meanwhile, at the table, Viscount Doherty, Viscount Karma, Viscountess Rani, and Viscount Parma are at the table together, while the man reports to them an order of 8 sky fortresses, 400 units of Vanguard exclusive equipment, 400 units of Vanguard exclusive hoverboards, 8 Vanguard Vanguard high-speed combat support ships with seating for 50 people, and 100 teleport artifacts, 4,000 effect armors, 4,000 swords for knights, and 20 medium-sized transport ships for 500 people seatings. One of them asked if it was really the list of military supplies Adrian purchased while touring the capital today. Parma shouted that Adrian, that brat, is really thinking of waging a war. Karma tells everyone that Adrian is truly crazy to spend 70 trillion on weapons in one day, and Doherty tells them that it was 140 trillion, to be exact, since Adrian paid 70 trillion in advance and will be paying the remaining amount in installments. He asks if it isn't their entire kingdom's defense budget from last year. Karma puts his hand on his head and worriedly says that he took the situation too lightly. Doherty tells them that even if Adrian purchased weapons, they would all be useless if no one used them, and Adrian, who is still a new lord, would not have proper knighthood yet. But then, Ronnie asks them if it's really true and if anything has gone according to their expectations since Adrian showed up. She tells them that Adrian is someone they shouldn't think about using common sense on and that they can't do that to someone who is about to become the Archmage. Parma asks her if she meant to look at the situation as it is, and she asks Parma back if it wouldn't be better to keep the worst case scenario in mind. Then she tells them that they can't be running about in confusion all the time. Suddenly, a butler tells them that honestly, before Adrian was honored with his title, Adrian once posted a night job posting on online diaries, and there were about 4,000 comments from within the kingdom saying they wanted to work with him in the announcement. Karma tells everyone that it was arrogant of Adrian to act like a lord even before getting his title and asks them if it doesn't mean they got caught in the net Adrian set, and if Adrian also hires a stewardess for the sky fortresses. The butler replies that Adrian didn't. However, Adrian has acquired a magic tower and an artifact production company today, so it wouldn't be possible to utilize the magicians and technicians there. Karma sighs and tells everyone that in the end, that means Ronnie's prediction was right, and if a territorial war were to take place, there would be a greater possibility that they might go against the maximum power a Marquis could ever possess. Parma asks them if that's all and reminds them that the leader is an Archmage and can also utilize his fiancée, who is an aura master, making them all think that it is terrifying, and they all know that a one-sided massacre will occur. Doherty asks them if it wasn't a territorial war between Marquis Lawrence and their 4 families. Then he tells everyone that if Adrian drags the surrounding territories, they can gather as many allies as they can, and then it'll be a civil war instead of a territorial war. Then the royal family will not tolerate it. But Ronnie asks Doherty if he thinks Adrian will be wary of the royal family when Adrian was the one who announced that the territory was in front of their majesty. She tells them that there is no way to prepare for a countermeasure from the beginning. Doherty worriedly curses and asks how they could be humiliated that way, while Parma is fuming in anger upon hearing them and shouts orders to his butler to bring that bastard there, making the butler ask him who. Then Parma angrily replies that he was talking about the main reason why it was happening. Meanwhile, in midair, at Marquis Lawrence's estate in Marinkov Metropolitan City, Crowe is flying while Adrian is on the rooftop looking at the view. He tells Arsha that it feels new to him, but when he looks down at the huge city, he can really feel like he has become a Grand Lord. Suddenly, someone asks him how he feels about the newly formed Knight Troop, and he tells Perseus that he was there. Then he tells Perseus that they are a bit last minute, but they look pretty good. Perseus tells him that it wasn't just pretty good, but it was a miracle to create a Knight Troop in such a short amount of time. Perseus excitedly tells him that it was expected from the Riverdale family that he has great insight, but he just clarifies to Perseus that it was because they all said they wanted to work with him and came there, and it was a relief that a lot of people see him in a good light. Then the lady with Perseus tells him that he really surprised them several times, and Marinkov City's head of security and leader of the dispatched Knight Troop, Baroness Helena, excitedly tells him that he brought in a large number of military supplies, including sky fortresses and vanguard equipment just a few days ago, and now he has also prepared the knights in advance. He feels pressured because of their words while telling them that he was just lucky. Perseus asks him how could he say it was luck and if everything wasn't done under his calculation. Then he tells him that there was nothing meaningless in every single action he did, and Helena confidently agrees with Perseus, making him clear his throat and his face red in shyness. He knows that he just drew the rough picture, but he doesn't need to tell them that things really came together so well, to the point that everyone was amazed because of a little bit of luck. Then he asks them what they think about the knights and if they can dispatch them to the territory war right away. Perseus replied yes, and he chose those with good experience as well, so it seemed like there was no problem, and Helena told him that she thought so too. He heard his sky fortress moving and saw his 2nd generation metal fortress, 2.5 generation, 1st generation, and 3rd generation staying in mid-air. He thinks if they are going to give them, they should have given him the later gen aircraft and wonders why they gave him the discontinued ones. But since they are a royal gift, he can't dispose of them just as he pleases, so he decides to use them for a few years and sell them cheaply to a small or medium-sized estate when the time comes. Then he tells them that if there is no problem, they should get moving, making them ask him for pardon in confusion. He tells them that they should go into battle. Perseus asks him when they are going into battle. He orders Perseus to finish the preparations in 3 hours and divide them into 4 groups. Then they should lock them in the territory so they couldn't join forces, and the main force, including Arsha and him, would capture the territory one by one. Perseus reminds him that they need permission from the royal family, but he just tells Perseus that it is only a matter of fast or slow, but the permission will be given anyway. Until then, they should call it training, and it was an excuse that a lot of people make. He decided that this time, he won't be just giving orders from somewhere safe, but he would go into battle directly with Arsha and show off his military power without hesitation. He asks himself if he shouldn't be the leader who leads everyone from the front and captures the hearts of subordinates from the early days of taking power. Meanwhile, Parma is disciplining his son severely, Doherty is drowning his problems in alcohol, Ronnie's daughter is begging her for forgiveness, and Karma's daughter is hiding under her blanket, shaking and crying in fear. He walks with Arsha and Perseus by his side and confidently tells them that they should march. Meanwhile, in Pharma Viscounty, someone is rolling a straw in the juice while saying that it's troublesome. Then a lady couldn't believe that Adrian had been bestowed with a title. She knew that the Majesty, the Emperor, wanted her to recruit Adrian, but no one would have thought they'd move that fast. The people around her were panicking. She smiled, thinking that as soon as Adrian received the title, Adrian requested a territorial war with 4 viscounties at the same time. So, Earl Elford thought they'd find out if Adrian was a lunatic without any plans or an eccentric person with something in mind. Suddenly, another lady appeared and told her that she had no idea there would be another visitor. Earl remembered that voice, and she knew that it was Duchess Olivia Riverdale. Then they looked at each other in silence. Meanwhile, inside the Parma mansion, he was sitting on the sofa, smiling, with Parma and his men respectfully smiling at him. Parma tells him that he was only aware that the permission for the territory war has yet to be granted, but he deployed his troops in front of their viscountcy, so he wonders if he was ignoring the law. He tells Parma that he must be mistaken, making Parma ask him what he means by mistaken. He replies that they are only training right now, making Parma unable to believe it, but he just sighs and asks Parma if he attacked his viscountcy. Parma replies that he didn't. Then he tells Parma not to worry because he is someone who upholds the law too, so he won't attack until permission for the territory war is granted. He also tells Parma not to mind them and go on with his work. Parma asks him if he is going to attack immediately once permission is granted, and he replies, of course, and that they just happen to be training right in front of him right now. Parma asks him if isn't that too far-fetched and shouts at him that it is an act that goes against morality. But he just asks Parma in his head if his master's son bullying him during school is moral. Still, he admits to himself that it was a bit too far-fetched. Parma tells him that the permission for that territory war won't be granted in the first place and asks him if it was even reasonable to start a war over a petty fight from his school days. But then his smartwatch rings, then he uses his magic to make them silent. Then he answers the call, and someone excitedly calls him to tell him that as of this time, permission has been granted for the territory war he requested, making Parma shocked. He tells his man that it is very well and thinks that the timing is just so perfect. He snaps his fingers and tells Parma that it seems like the royal family has different opinions from him, making Parma unable to believe it, and asks if they have been abandoned by the royal family. He tells Parma that they must have just decided it based on who is more valuable to them. Parma begs him to make a rational decision, but he just tells Parma to leave, and from that day on, the one that he has to convince isn't him, but Viscount Parma. The only way that the Parma territory can survive is by surrendering, and other than that, there is no other way to avoid that war. Then he signals to Perseus, and Perseus opens the teleportation interfering magic spell and activates them. Then he called the Sky Fortress and Vanguard troop to order them to march and tell them that their goal was the fall of Parma Viscounty. Then he ordered them to march forward, making Parma and his men stunned in fear. He asks Parma if he is not going back and tells him that he should have no time for leisure. So, Parma walks away in frustration. He extends his hand to Arsha and she takes it. Then he tells Perseus that from that point on, Arsha and he will directly join the front lines, so he'll leave the command to him for the time being, which leaves Perseus shocked. Perseus tries to ask him, but he walks away with Arsha, telling her that they should go, to which Arsha replies, yes. Perseus informs the Vanguard troop that Adrian and Her Excellency Count Klein Arsha will personally lead from the front line. They all respond with a yes while looking at Adrian and laughing. He recalls someone once said that even after achieving revenge, nothing but a sense of futility would remain, and in the end, revenge only begets more revenge. However, he has a different opinion because nothing provides a clearer sense of purpose than revenge. From Anna and Cedric, up to the Academy's villains, the eradication of their existence can be seen as the starting point of his new future. More than anything, it's enjoyable to watch his enemies scream with twisted faces. Meanwhile, inside the Parma mansion, Parma's son is shocked and crying in fear. He asks what that explosion was just now, if Adrian is insane, if Adrian really shot at them, and if that lunatic is really attacking them. He questions the reinforcement men about their likelihood of winning, and one of them replies that Adrian's military strength alone is more than twice theirs. There is even an aura master and an archmage, and honestly, their likelihood of winning is close to none. He asks the man if he's kidding and reminds him that he hired him after paying a hefty amount of money. He questions what will happen to him if they lose in that war. The man clenches his fist in anger, telling him that even in that situation, he's only thinking about himself. He asks if he thinks he hired him just to listen to such things and what he expects to happen if they lose. The man then tells him that in that situation, the only option is to die by Adrian's hands himself. He also adds that if he lets Adrian get his revenge, Adrian may feel a bit less angry, and the damage to their territory may be reduced. He asks the man how he could say that to their master's son, but the man angrily states that everyone in the castle probably thinks the same way. He mentions that he's always been the one to take the blame, but no one understands why they're the ones in danger of dying. Furthermore, when those below them die, they will likely blame him, not Adrian. The man asks him if there are more than 10 innocent people who died directly or indirectly by his hands and tells him that, in the end, they finally found out what you reap what you sow means. He thanks him so much for the lesson he gave them. He clenches his teeth, thinking that he was ruling the class, and wonders what the hell their problem was when he just instilled discipline in those lowly people who failed, and Adrian, the bastard, was the abnormal one. Suddenly, the door of his room swings open, and he sees the Knight Commander. The Knight Commander walks to him while he is telling him that it's good that he came and he should hurry and get him out of there because if they ask for help from other territories and push them back with their numbers, they could win. But the Knight Commander just throws an armor set in front of him and explains that those are the Vanguard equipment, Force Armor and Force Sword. Then he orders him to wear those and request a one-on-one match with Adrian, as it was Viscount Parma's order. He tries to refuse, but the knights forcefully put it on him, making him continuously curse and tell the knights to see if he was going to follow that order. He shouts at them that they are all insanely crazy while remembering Adrian's threat that he was going to torment them all in the most horrible ways and make them regret being born into that world. A moment later, he is all suited up, crying hard, and then he shouts in frustration. A moment later, Parma's knight walks out of the room with Parma's son. Before that, the Knight Commander tells Parma's son that there is no need to despair, because even if Adrian is an archmage, a mage is still a mage in the end, and a vanguard armed with force equipment should be able to face Adrian. Parma's son tearfully asks the Knight Commander if he calls it comforting. The Knight Commander replied that it was not, but he was telling him how he could live and asked him if he was planning to tremble out of fear, hide in the corner, and then get his head sliced off. The Knight Commander tells him that even if he hides like that, there will only be one outcome, and he is just becoming an offering for revenge. Then he asks him what would happen if he took advantage of the Vanguard equipment while letting Adrian's guard down and defeated Adrian. Then he tells him that Adrian has no wife or successor, so the territory war will end at that moment, and it will end with their victory. In other words, he will become the hero of their viscountcy and asks him if he understands what he is saying. Parma's son thinks he'll do it and he'll act like a clown as they wish for once. Then he shouted to the knights that he was going to live, he was going to kill that damned Adrian, and he won't let any of them be, to which one of the knights replied that if he defeated Adrian, they shall gladly receive their punishment. Parma's son thinks it might be possible because Vanguard equipment, with its powerful attack and defense power, hasn't gotten its nickname for nothing, just to be killed by a mage. And as the Knight Troop Commander said, if Adrian lets his guard down, the possibility of a miracle happening was there. But then blood splatters on his suit, and he sees their knights, one by one, falling to the ground dead. Then he hears their knights asking how the mage did it, not to come to them, and there were monsters. Then he sees Adrian in midair, attacking their knights easily by using magic power, and Arsha slashing every knight in her way using her sword, making him wonder if those were an archmage and an aura master. He fearfully asks the commander if it was a joke and if he wants him to get in there. Suddenly, one of Parma's knights shouts and calls Adrian a monster, and they all jump to attack him together while telling him to die. But he simply puts his hand on the ground to gather his magic power and pierces his wand into the ground, releasing a strong thunderbolt that attacks the knights. Then Parma's son hears a loud noise above them, and when he looks up, he sees Sky Fortress attacking their own gold Sky Fortress, and it breaks, making him unable to believe it. Then Adrian's sky fortress hits their sky fortress away, making the ground shake, and he bends down on the ground in shock. Suddenly, Adrian asks who they have there, and when he looks up, he sees Adrian standing in front of him. Adrian smiles and tells Parma's son that he thought he'd be hiding somewhere. Adrian's knight corners Parma's knight, who raises their hand, indicating surrender, while telling Xerath Parma that it was unexpected that he was there. Suddenly, a hand pushed Xerath forward, making him look back in confusion. He saw the knight commander silently glaring at him. Xerath clenched his teeth in fear and shouted, telling him that he challenged him to a one-on-one duel. Adrian looked at Xerath confused, and Xerath told him that if he is a noble who values honor, surely he won't ignore his challenge. However, Adrian just snaps his fingers while asking Xerath what he was on about. Then something swiftly attacked Xerath's hand, and Xerath's blood splattered everywhere. Xerath shouted in pain because his hand was cut off and cried that he was dying. But Adrian just told Xerath that he spent 70 trillion loot in installments to purchase weapons and somehow felt like he could pay it off in no time. Xerath cried in pain and anger while glaring at him, but Adrian told Xerath that there was Vanguard equipment dropping down here and there in a sky fortress in the backyard, all while Crowley held Xerath's hand. Then he smilingly asked Xerath if the highlight of all of that was their family's treasury. Xerath told him not to tell him that it was his goal, and he replied that it was too, for his revenge and to earn money, like killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Then Crowley flew above Xerath, making Xerath fall to the ground in shock and fear. He told Xerath that he had broken ribs twice, once the humerus, once the carpal bone, and once the tarsal bone. Xerath confusedly asked him what he was talking about, and he replied that those were the bones that he broke. He said that he would have endured it if he had only caused him fractures because he has such strong patience, but they tormented him mentally too much, to the point that it even upset him. Arsha, who had heard everything, angrily walked toward them to kill Xerath, but he stopped her and told Xerath that he wouldn't let him die comfortably. Then he healed Xerath using his healing power and ordered his knight to take good care of Xerath because it was no fun if he just died from excessive blood loss. The knight immediately replied yes and dragged Xerath away, who was begging him to forgive him. Then he smiled and looked at Parma's knights, and the knight commander shatteringly asked him if they should escort him to the Lord's office. He smiled and told the knight commander that it was kind of him. The battle between Marquis Lawrence Adrian and the Parma Viscountcy ended in just 30 minutes. Meanwhile, nearby at Parma's Viscounty, Earl asks Olivia if she is right that Adrian is from the social circle of the Riverdale family. She tells Olivia that she wouldn't have come there to help Adrian either and wonders if she came there to check for herself because she suspected that Adrian wasn't from the social circle of the Riverdale family. Olivia tells her not to frame her strangely and says that Adrian is indeed from their social circle. However, she can say that she was there to cheer on Adrian as an excuse. She then asks her what brings the head of the intelligence department of the Brigham Empire there and tells her that if she was thinking of taking Adrian out of the empire, it'd be a good idea to stop. The two ladies smile at each other with killing intent, but Olivia breaks the silence by telling Earl that they should just keep it at that. Earl agrees with Olivia and tells her that even if they fight each other, it'll only tire both of them out. Suddenly, they feel a teleportation interfering magic spell, making them realize that the war had begun. They use their eyesight skill to see how good Adrian is, but then they are surprised to see that a mage is engaged in a short-range battle. Olivia looks at Adrian carefully in confusion, but Earl knows that the biggest reason why mages' movements are limited in the modern battlefield is not because of compatibility with vanguards. Teleportation interfering magic spell was a short movement magic spell that can increase the survivability and mobility of mages, who are relatively less agile. As the best evasion technique to that, teleportation interfering magic spell became more common, and the spell can no longer be used on the battlefield. She also knows that it ultimately forced mages to be eliminated from the battlefield. But Adrian's battle seems to suggest that he can just dodge it himself if he can't use teleportation. She asks Olivia if she thinks that kind of battle is possible, and Olivia replies that even with a lot of aiding magic spells, it won't be easy. It looks like it requires an ample amount of combat experience, a trained physique, and battle sense because it's not something just anyone can pull off. She tells Olivia that she has an amazing priest, and Olivia tells her that she was telling her in advance, but she should stop with her interest in their people. She tells Olivia that it's unfortunate because she quite liked Adrian in many ways and says goodbye to Olivia because she has seen everything she wanted to see, and the result of that territory war is obvious. Olivia sighs and tells her okay. Olivia knows that she came there to check just in case, but Adrian showed many habits unique to their Riverdale school while casting those magic spells, and she tells herself that she shouldn't have doubted Adrian. She got to watch a good show thanks to Adrian. Then Olivia stretches her body, wondering if she should also head back now, because she has done checking it for herself, without realizing that Crowley saw her from the top. Sharing Crowley's vision, Adrian also saw that Olivia and Earl had finally left, and he was glad that it looked like he had tricked them well. Then the Knight Commander of Parma guided him to Parma's office, and he blew the office door open. Parma looked back and was shocked to see him with Arsha. Parma shouted for him not to come any closer, but then Parma tripped on his own feet and slammed onto the ground. Adrian hit the ground near Parma's private parts and asked Parma why he didn't sign the surrender document. Parma asked him what he was going to do to him and his entire family. He told Parma not to worry because he would not kill anyone except for the main culprit, and in return, they would become a fallen noble family who had been robbed of their property and title, or else he wished for death. Parma cried defeatedly and told him that he would sign it. The moment Parma's Viscounty collapsed in the war between Adrian and the 4 Viscounties, everybody knew the war was basically over. Later, in Doherty Viscounty, Adrian's Sky Fortresses attacked Doherty's Sky Fortresses while Doherty reported to the other families that Adrian, who had occupied Parma Viscounty, was said to be heading to their territory. But to be clear, Adrian and Arsha may have already arrived there. Then he shouted to them that they must not forget that if he loses there, it'll just be their turn next, to which Karma replied that he knew. Then a loud explosion could be heard outside, making Doherty jump a little in shock. Karma asked them how about they just hand over their children. But Ronnie told them that there was no use for it because they said that as soon as Adrian subdues the young master of Parma, Adrian enters their castle on foot. Karma asked her what she meant by it, and she angrily told them that to Adrian, revenge was just a justification for war in the first place, and it was obvious that it was to fill Adrian's treasury while building an army. Also, Adrian is planning to pass along his military supply shopping receipts to them. Doherty worriedly asked them if it wouldn't be an even bigger problem, and Karma asked Ronnie if she had any way to stop it. She replied that not that it was obvious they couldn't ordinarily win that war, so they must change their method. Later, Ronnie's Vanguard army reported that they had arrived at the teleportation area, and a few seconds later, Karma's Vanguard army reported that they had arrived too. Then a man named Dennis called his lord to report that Doherty's Vanguard army had just arrived at the teleportation area as well. Doherty told Dennis that teleportation would be carried out at 12:10 based on Rondel Standard Time, to which Dennis replied that he understood. Then the Vanguard commander of Karma told his comrade that it was a battle of time and the march would be empty right now. The Vanguard commander of Ronnie told his people that they should take advantage of this time to take the march's facilities and citizens hostage. Then Dennis, the Knight commander of Doherty, told his people that if that operation succeeded, the tide of the war would be upturned in an instant, and they must succeed at all costs. Then one of Dennis's people reported to him that it was 15 seconds until the operation time, to which he replied, "Okay." Dennis began to count down and opened the seal, to which the Knight commander of Karma and Ronnie also did while counting down. When the countdown reached 0, they all together ripped the seal, and the transportation light appeared beneath them. Then in midair, the vanguards of the 3 Viscounties were transported. Ronnie's Vanguard Knight Troop reported that they were online, same as Karma and Doherty's Vanguard Knight Troop. When they were about to begin their operation, someone told them that he had prepared a welcome ceremony for all of them. They were all stunned in surprise when they saw a huge blue flying ship in front of them with Adrian, Perseus, and Arsha aboard. He told them to come with him and opened a huge transportation magic circle in front of them. While they were being pulled, Dennis cursed and shouted that the operation had been discovered, and then they all slowly disappeared. They were transported somewhere, and Dennis asked them if they had been teleported. When Dennis was about to ask where they were, he stopped in shock when he saw that they were being surrounded by Adrian's vanguards and sky fortresses that were above them. Dennis cursed in frustration, realizing that they were completely surrounded, while Adrian looked at them. Beforehand, Adrian's ship with Adrian and his people on board were waiting for the vanguards to arrive. Suddenly, they all felt something coming, so he stood up and told his people that they were here. Perseus asked him if he had clairvoyance ability, and he replied that it was a simple prediction. Perseus told him that it was getting scary now and he didn't know how relieved he was that Adrian was not his enemy. He raised his wand and released his magic power, smilingly telling them that it was a passable strategy from the enemy, but it was useless if they could read their thoughts. Perseus sighed and told him that the enemies had finally gained his pity. Then, the enemy's vanguards appeared right in front of him, and he told them that they had prepared a welcoming ceremony for all of them, so they should come with him and teleported all of them. Back in the present, he jumped out of his ship and landed in front of the enemy's vanguards. He ordered them to disarm themselves at once and surrender because if they did so, they would be able to keep their lives. However, Dennis clenched his teeth in anger and shouted that he was Adrian Lawrence, confusing him. Then Dennis told the others that the war would be over if they just captured Adrian, which surprised him because he didn't expect it. Perseus panickingly called him in worry, while Arsha swiftly ran and landed in front of him. A vanguard jumped toward him to attack him when Dennis shouted to everyone that it was their chance, and they should go at Adrian all at once. One of Doherty's vanguards launched an attack on him while shouting for him to surrender obediently. However, he attacked the man with his magic and told them that they should be the ones surrendering. The man fell to the ground dead, and he remarked that he didn't even consider that situation worth his time. Then Arsha swiftly attacked them, causing loud explosions. Dennis cursed in fear but still ordered everyone to kill Adrian instead of subduing him, ending the territory war right there. He killed the vanguards attacking him while wondering why he even went easy on them, and then he attacked them with his flame blast skill. Dennis knew he couldn't dodge that one, so he tried to offset it with his force sword. He swung his sword to cut the flames in half, but the fire still burned him, making him shout in pain. A moment later, when the fire was extinguished, Dennis's armor was destroyed. But before he could react, he saw Adrian speedily running toward him. He shouted at Adrian not to come any closer while swinging his sword continuously, but Adrian blocked it with his magic shield and dodged Dennis's powerful attack, leaving Dennis surprised. He couldn't believe that Adrian was making the aura force of Vanguard equipment bounce off him with a barely fifth circle hard shield. Dennis clenched his teeth in sweat and shouted, asking how could a magician be like this. Adrian just raised his wand and told Dennis that he was hearing the same line he had said most today. Then he killed Dennis. A moment later, he was in his mansion, drinking a soda when a system appeared by his side. Then he noticed that there were numerous articles stating that once Adrian had gathered sufficient military power, the outcome of the battle had already been decided. Some nobles raised concerns with the royal family, suggesting that granting permission for the territory war might have been excessive. Initially, everyone had expressed concerns about the unreasonable request for the territory war, but the subsequent response had been unexpected. People were now speculating whether Adrian's sword would be pointed towards someone else. The article stating that the territory war between him and the 4 viscounties had ended in just half a day caught his attention, confirming that the war had indeed concluded. The final struggle had been a solo operation because he knew there was no way for the viscounties to win, and he had been able to swiftly capture the remaining castles. The system showed him that his relationship with the vanguards was characterized by favorability and a state of obedience akin to an employment relationship. Their status towards him was one of fear and awe, recognizing that he was the one who had ultimately handled everything. Then someone knocked on his door and he invited them in. Arsha opened the door and walked inside while the maid commented that she was covered in dirt. Arsha replied that her mouth was bored and she wanted cake. The maid reminded her that snacks should come after meals and that she had already eaten plenty of cookies in the morning. Arsha sat down on the sofa, causing the maid to panic and warn her about potentially staining the sofa with blood. He found it a bit noisy but noticed that Catherine had adapted well, which was a relief. A few days ago, right after the end of the territory war, the people approached Catherine, admitted they were wrong, apologized to her, and begged her for help. Catherine fearfully asked him what was happening, and he explained that it was just as she had seen. These were the 4 people who had bullied her in the past. He also mentioned that she had to drop out of school just because she talked to him, who was being bullied, and he reminded her of the bullying she had endured. He explained that for political reasons, he needed some time but planned to make Isabella Cascable and Philo Brooks apologize as well. Catherine begged him to stop, but he sighed, held her hand, and told her he couldn't fulfill her requests. He healed her wounds and told her that she might not realize it, but she had been his savior, and they should keep smiling from now on. Then he called Catherine, and she immediately asked him if he had summoned her. He inquired about how her days had been going, and Catherine smiled, replying that every day was fun. They looked at each other in silence, and he told her that it was good to hear.